All right, so what we have here is a mix that we're going to work on. Now, you've already seen a little bit how I do editing, and that kind of gets all these files prepared. And if I zoom out, we could kind of see all the different tracks that we need to do. Now, this is going to be a kind of condensed version of what I do to mix because I've already spent hours kind of setting up the overall sound scheme of the whole album by spending hours and hours on one song. And now I'm going to kind of take some of the foundation of those settings and add it to this song. So what I'm doing right now is I have a whole bank of stereo effects like reverbs, delays, different things like that. And every time I click this, my audio drops out. So that's why I'm not talking when I hit the button here. And basically I have 8 basic effects that I use. That was kind of part of my processing. So what's nice about this program is I could actually save them as banks and then load them all in. So what did I just do? Well, let's take a look. So if we look at this over here, you could see that I have a reverb that we are using. And you're saying, okay, well, what does reverb sound like? Well, if we take my channel and we want to send it to this reverb, the reverb sounds like this. So I will use that setting to create ambience in the track. Let's see what else we got. This is a different reverb. So what does this reverb sound like? Well, let's go back to my track and let's assign it to that reverb. And that one sounds a little bit more like a hall, where the other one was a little bit more brighter. And then we have the vocal reverb, which I know is on 8. And that one is huge. Then we have some delays, which I will play one. Check. Yo. What up, G? So I'm going to turn that off. That could get annoying while you're talking. So anyways, I have all these different effects set up, and different instruments will be going to different reverbs. And the reason I do that, so it just doesn't all sound the same. You have different layers of depth going on. So now that we have that set up, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to load in some of my drum settings. And the easier way for me to do this is to actually pop these tracks in and then just move my audio to them. So we're going to take this one, drop it down there. And then we're going to take all these. Move it up there. And we are going to, whoops, mute off that. Now, I loaded in all these tracks, and what this is going to do is this brings in, you can see I got some EQ settings. I got a compressor, which actually limits my dynamic range of the instrument. And we could kind of keep going through. That's the kick drum. And if I go to the snare drum, it has a different setup, a different set of compression and EQ on it. If I go to my toms, they're a little different, very minute stuff going on. So anyways, all those settings are put in. However, there are settings that didn't transfer across that I have to put in. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pan all my stuff out. So what panning does is it allows me to put it over on that side or over on this side. So let's go over to our drums, and I consider drums kind of the stereo palette of the whole mix. So Our kick and snare are most important, so we're going to keep those dead center. But our toms, when someone rolls across the toms, we want them to go across the whole spectrum. So we're going to move these around, and the little visual kind of gives you how far over it's moving within the spectrum. This is our ride and hi-hat cymbals, which keep the time. And this is our overheads, which will do left and right. And that way, when you hear a drum roll, like this one, you'll hear it go from right to left, I guess. Not the best drum roll to hear, but here's a good one. So what's cool is you could hear the drums kind of like bouncing all around, because when I played the part, I thought of the stereo spectrum while I was doing it, and made it happen that way. So, all right, so now that we have that set up, there's a lot of tom information going on, and we are going to go ahead and prepare some of the tracks. So along with this, what you could hear when the kick drum hits is you could hear some bouncing around. I'll play this to you. So that's bleed, and we don't want any bleed in these tom tracks. So what I do is I just literally delete them by editing off the sound. So, and then I got to make sure I don't accidentally delete any of my tom tracks. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And we're going to keep going here. So I need to clean these all up so I don't have any of that resonance coming through. Now the resonance that was there is very minimal, but if we want really clean, polished mixes, this is what makes the difference, is getting rid of this extra sound, because all it does is add more noise and phase to the mix. And if you're wondering what phase sounds like, it's the difference of my voice now and the difference of what my voice sounds like here. That's phase. So any kind of additive to the original sound besides the original sound will cause that kind of sound, and we don't want that. So we're just going to edit all this off. All right, so right now I'm just doing kind of gross adjustments. I'll finalize that stuff a little bit later on. All right, so now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my toms and snare drum and I'm going to assign them over to the reverb of choice, which in this case is reverb number 1. And now when you hear these, it will sound really cool. So you heard that difference there. That was pretty cool. All right. So now I'm going to check my overheads. I got an extra set of overheads here, and I need to see what it is. And it looks like it's just the end of the song.
The moments running forever.
And we have those panned like the other ones, so I think we're all good with that. Now we have two bass tracks here. I have a bass preset that I've been really digging. A lot of times I have to do a lot of stuff to the bass, and these tracks that I created, like I should be taking the credit for this. It's because we have a phenomenal bass player that we don't have to do much. His sound is already amazing. So what I'm going to do here is I just created some tracks with all my settings, and I'm going to just grab all these and move them up, and we'll hear some of it. And meanwhile, I'm going to mute off all these other tracks because we don't need them right now. Except me, of course. All right. So as soon as the bass takes off, I'm going to have the other low note just kind of fade out and kind of trade spots here. But you can see I'm not even doing anything to this bass. It just sounds amazing. In fact, this whole album was really recorded well to where when I'm mixing, there's not a lot that I have to do. So all the old tracks I don't need anymore. Remove those. All right. And in the editing, I cleaned all this up, so I don't have to really worry about editing. So today, that's what's kind of nice about doing editing and mixing in two different sessions is I get to do most of the technical stuff out of the way during editing, and then mixing, I could try to be creative. So right now, it's a little technical to where I'm just setting stuff up. But then it's all about being creative and getting the sound to blend the way I want to. Now, in this song, there's some keyboards, there's also guitars, and you have to kind of figure out, well, you know, which one is the main one. And it looks like this one pretty much, it's really more of a guitar song, but there's so much keyboards that I'm going to have to just, you know, pick one and kind of get to the finish line a little bit. So I'm going to start out with keyboards actually. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to send them to the reverb of choice for them, and I am doing number 2, and I already know somewhere around -7 is good for them. And then I'm going to go through and EQ each one of these. So right here, this is organs are actually kind of difficult to mix because they have a lot of information in it. And I want the low end to kind of come through, but I don't want a lot of the super low end because it'll get in the way of the other instruments. However, this other track has so much low end, it's pretty cool, and I don't want to take that away. So we're going to kind of keep that one there. That one we're going to keep there. Now it has a lot of super low. You can see it way down here. So I'm going to take some of that off. Because probably once it's in the mix with everything, there's just going to be so much low-end stuff going on that we don't necessarily need it. And a lot of these sounds have a lot of hard edge, so I don't really have to EQ any brightness or anything for it to cut in the mix. It's already kind of there doing it. So you can see this huge low-end bump, but it's really not a necessity. We just need the highs to kind of come through. So we got rid of all that information. And that just gives us more dynamics of the whole song, which is really cool. Alright, so let's hear this. So, as you can see, there's a few things that I wanted to stick out a little bit more. So for that, I did add a little bit more high end on those to make them pop. All right, so now we have some ambience. We have somewhat of a mix on the keyboards. And you could tell from the way the song starts that they're kind of important. It's kind of a big thing. Now, if we look at the guitars, all the rhythm tracks here, looks like, for the most part, this is kind of an acoustic bass thing going on with some distortion filling it up. So we're going to kind of turn these on, see what we got here. Here comes the next one. Let's hear the distortion. So I can't hear the guitars. So I'm gonna first of all bring them up. And I want to kind of make them a little fuller sounding. So I'm going to try something. Nope. Let's get rid of that. All right. So this is kind of a harmonic generator. We'll see what this does to them. So right now you're hearing mostly just the picking. And now you're actually hearing some tone. I'm going to throw some ambience on them. So right now I took the distorted guitar, since there's only one of them, panned it a little left, and then put the delay of it on the right side. And for me, the distorted guitar adds tragedy, like this just gut-wrenching tone. So I'm just peppering it in there to blend with the other guitars. So right now, I'm kind of feeling that maybe all my instruments are too loud compared to the drums, but I could be wrong about that. So I'm going to wait until the song kicks in right here. All right, so here's a keyboard solo that kind of goes through different octaves, and when it does, certain octaves of it cut through really well, other octaves don't, so I need to balance that out. So we're going to kind of listen through and see where we're at. So right there really kicks in, and we are at 519. So I'm going to go to 373. All right, so as you heard on that pass, you know, he goes into lower octaves and it kind of drops out a little bit, and then he hits the high octaves and it really cuts through. So changing this intro here really balanced that out. However, there is a few notes here and there that could maybe use a little bit more micromanaging. However, that is a artistic decision, whether we want to get every note perfectly even or do we want to have some dynamics during the solo. So I'm going to take one more pass through this section here to see if there's anything that really drops out. So right there, it's kind of just a little section. Now watch, I'm just going to put a little bump in there. So I was pretty happy with everything else. So for now, I'm going to go with that, and then I'll, you know, fine tune it if I need to later. I try to, like, when I originally mixed this and got dialed in the settings, there's no broad strokes. I'm really diving in and just really digging into the stuff. But when it comes to this part of the game, I'm kind of doing broad strokes to see if there's any magic that just kind of happens through the interactions of stuff. Because you don't want to take the life out of things when you're working on these mixes. So I'm going to save this, and now I'm going to go to lead vocal. I'm going to load in my vocal settings. Now a lot of people do a lot of crazy compression and things like that to the vocals, and normally I do too, but I did a lot of compression on the way to tape on this one. And we still use the term tape, even though we're not recording to real tape. It's all going to the hard drive. So I'm just doing some warming effects through here and some peak illumination. Doing some de-essing, which takes the S's away, which is really awesome. I could show you some of that. And just an EQ. And this is like a vintage old EQ that's been replicated digitally. So sounds amazing. So, first thing I'm going to do is add some of my effects. And here's what the vocals sound like.
So hand me a stone to carve in my name. My final surrender is joining the game.
So anytime he says an S, you'll see this jump.
The rules of exclusion, no longer my pain. To love and be loved, they are not the same.
And if we take that off, you'll hear the same will really jump out.
Be loved, they are not the same.
It's like not the same. And you put it back on, it's not the same. It's a little bit mellower on the ears. All right, so we're gonna mess around with the effects a little bit on this.
So hand me a stone to carve in my name. My final surrender is joining the game. The rules of exclusion, no longer my pain. To love and be loved, they are not the same.
This one's delay. Let's crank it up so you can hear it.
Burning my eyes on your aura of fire, filling my soul with a secret desire. Run from the moment of feelings denied. My loneliness wins, spoils of pride. My loneliness, loneliness, loneliness wins. Web we have spun, targets in your heart, the feast has begun. Run from the moment my feelings denied. A smile on my lips while I'm bleeding inside. I'm bleeding, I'm bleeding, I'm bleeding to death.
So right here, what we did is we recorded his voice twice, but singing in unison. In other words, it's not harmony. And what this allows is it's basically a thickening agent. So if you hear the voice by itself,
Capturing you in the web we have spun,
and now add the thickening,
capturing you in the web we have spun, targets in your heart, the feast has begun. Run from the moment my feet.
and then at the next chorus, probably have some harmony here that we add in too. So now we got 3 vocals going.
Burning my eyes on your aura of fire, filling my soul with the sweetest desire. Run from the moment my feelings denied. Run from the moment it's easy to hide.
So we haven't actually done anything with this guitar yet. And yes, it's a pretty big part of the song actually. So let me see what we got. So you can see it's pretty fat in the low end. We're doing a little bit of EQ right there. I'm going to bring a little bit more edge to it if I need it. I got it there. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put this through a ping-ponging delay.
Loneliness wins, spoils of pride. My loneliness, loneliness, loneliness wins.
Alright, so what I'm finding is this guitar part was done on a different day than these because it's not the same sound. So what I have to do is create a separate track for that. Get rid of this one. Get rid of these. And I have to have a whole different setting for this to match it a little bit. So this one doesn't need this bump. It doesn't need anything extra on the high end here. And then it probably needs a little bit more volume. So we're going to kind of bounce through a little bit back and forth and get the tones to match. And that did not take too much long. That didn't take that. And that didn't take that long. So now we just need to get a volume on it.
Loneliness, loneliness wins.
Alright, so I'm under the impression that these guitars are done the same day as this guitar, so I'm going to now copy the settings, and I'm going to paste it to here. Repan these out. See what that sounds like. So we evened out the keyboard solo, but now there's this added part that we didn't know about. So now, and I love the part, so I need to figure out what balance this is going to play in the song.
I'm bleeding, I'm bleeding, I'm bleeding today.
So one thing I will say about the solos, it seems like it kind of leads up and leads up and leads up and it gets a little louder and louder, but it's so loud at the end that I'm not sure I like that. So I'm doing a slow fade throughout that whole part, so it just takes some of the energy out. And let's see how it comes in here. We're looking for a nice handoff between the vocal and the solo, so one's not overpowering the other. I'm bleeding today. That's not too bad right now. I'll probably need some more context listening to the whole song. And then what I'll do is I'll listen to the song at different volumes and just make sure that it, you know, on different formats, like if you were going to have headphones on compared to speakers, things like that. Just make sure that everything's kind of, you know, sounding correct and balanced. And then after this part of it, what I do is I render out the whole track. Take all these individual tracks and it will finally be one stereo version, and from there it goes to mastering, and mastering puts the final touches on it and actually burns the final CD. So that's the mixing process.